The hearing will come to order. This is the hearing on the Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Asia, the Pacific, and the Global Environment. Today's particular hearing is on the subject of the legacies of war concerning the unexploded ordnances in the country of Laos, or Lao. Fortunately, my ranking member is also under the weather, so I don't blame him at all. Congressman Manzullo from from Illinois, I'm sorry. And I'm extremely happy that I have one of my colleagues who traveled with me to Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, and Japan recently, Congressman Mike Honda from California. I'm going to begin with the opening statement, and then we will then proceed from there. Ironically, 39 years ago to the day in 1971, the late Senator Edward M. Kennedy, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Investigative Problems Connected with Refugees and Escapees, held a hearing on April 21 and April 22nd in 1971 to address war-related civilian problems in Indochina, which includes Laos. Testifying before the subcommittee was the Honorable Paul McCloskey, a representative in Congress from the state of California, who had just recently returned from a visit to Laos, where he and his colleague, Congressman Waldy, also of California, had obtained certain facts that totally contradicted testimony that had been submitted to the subcommittee by the Departments of State and Defense on May 7th of the previous year, which was 1970. At issue was the causation of refugees and impact of U.S. Air Force bombing operations in Laos. The Departments of State and Defense suggested that U.S. bombing operations had been carefully directed and that very few inhabited villages were susceptible to being hit by U.S. air power. But as Senator Kennedy learned that day, and as we now know, the Departments of State and Defense submitted testimony that were incorrect and misleading. The truth is widespread. Bombing had taken place, and Lao refugees were succinct in describing the destruction of their homes as well as the use of the CBU cluster bombs and white phosphorus. However extensive were the U.S. bombing raids is the question. According to the Congressional Research Service, and I quote, Laos has been characterized as the most heavily bombed country in history on a per capita basis. From 1964 through 1973, the United States flew 580,000 bombing runs over Laos and dropped more than 2 million tons of ordnance on the countryside, double the amount dropped in Germany during World War II. Estimates of the number of unexploded submunitions from cluster bombs range from 8 million to 80 million, with less than 0.5% destroyed and less than 1% of contaminated lands cleared. End of quote. To be clear about what this means, I want to display a map of the U.S. force bombing data that I obtained from our U.S. Embassy while I was in Laos 2 years ago. This map shows those little dots, or if you can tell them if they were dots, it tells it all. Looking at this map, can anyone honestly believe that there was no impact on the civilian population? What makes this so sickening is that cluster bombs and white phosphorus were used against the civilian population of a country against whom the United States was not at war, as Congressman McCloskey stated. And I quote, "The bombing was done under the direction and control of the State Department, not the U.S. Air Force." In fact, the bombing was directed and controlled by the U.S. ambassador to Laos, or Laos. I quote, "Both the extent of the bombing and its impact on the civilian population of Laos have been deliberately concealed by the State Department," Congressman McCloskey stated. "And for historical purposes, I'm submitting the complete text of the 1971 hearing record to be made a part of this record some 39 years later." Some 39 years, in my humble opinion, is shameful that the U.S. State Department has not taken a more active role in making things right for the people of Laos. But for the first time in 39 years, to my knowledge, hopefully, I am hopeful that Secretary of State Hillary Clinton may be willing to champion their cause. However, I am deeply disturbed that the State Department is planning to request lower amounts of unexploded ordnance removal in Laos for FY 2011 than it spent in 2010. In my humble opinion, this is totally unacceptable course of action. During the Vietnam War, I served at the height of the Tet Offensive. And for as long as I live, I will continue to do all I can to help the victims of Agent Orange, as well as those who are and were affected by U.S. bombing operations in Laos. Calling for an official public hearing is one way to draw more attention to the matter, but Vietnam and Laos deserve more than a hearing. These countries deserve a concerted effort on the part of the United States government to help them rebuild, especially since their civilian populations were wrongfully targeted. Yes, we know that U.S. bombing campaign in Laos was designed to cut off North Vietnamese supply lines that ran through Laos. But no, the American people was not aware that the U.S. had undertaken, and I quote, "the most protracted bombing of civilian targets in history," end of quote, as Fred Rathman put it in a statement which was included in the 1971 hearing record. To this day, America does not support the bombing of civilian targets. And after every war, America has always helped countries rebuild. Even after Japan attacked the United States, U.S. assistance to Japan from 1946 to 1952 was about $15.2 billion in 2005 dollars, of which 77% was in grants, 23% was in loans, according to the Congressional Research Service. Also, according to the Congressional Research Service, from 2003 to 2006, the U.S. appropriated $35.7 billion for Iraq reconstruction. For Germany, quote, in constant 2005 dollars, the United States provided a total of $29.3 billion in assistance from 1946 and 1952, with 60% in economic grants and nearly 30% in economic loans, and the remainder in military aid. What have we done for Laos as a government? For now, the U.S. has been contributing about $3 million per year since 1994 for unexploded ordnance clearance operations in that country. As every single one of us knows, this pittance is as disgraceful as the compensation we paid when the U.S. accidentally bombed the Man Long village in Laos in January of 1968, which resulted in 54 persons killed. At the time, we compensated the village or villagers $55 for every person who had been killed. Senator Kennedy found that to be distressing. I do too. So enough is enough. Justice demands that these wrongs be set right. Yet our own State Department is planning to request lower amounts for unexploded ordnance removal in Laos for FY 2011 than the meager amount it barely spent in FY 2010. This is unconscionable. Laos is one of the poorest countries in Southeast Asia and one of the smallest recipients of U.S. assistance. As a country founded on Judaic principles, we can and should do better. I visited Laos again last year, and I can tell you, I will not rest until the U.S. government begins to take action and accepts moral and financial responsibility for the mess we left behind. Children in Laos are counting on us, and I want to especially recognize those who are being cared for at the Cope Center and applaud the good work of non-government organizations from around the world who are making a difference. I thank our witnesses from Legacies of War, the Humpty Dumpty Institute, and the Mines Advisory Group for their leadership. And I assure them that they have the full support of this subcommittee as we work together to make this right. I also want to commend His Excellency Tian Philankoni, the Ambassador of the Lao People's Democratic Republic, for the service he has rendered on behalf of his country. It is because of him that I was able to gain a first-hand understanding of how catastrophic U.S. Air Force bombing operations really were and are. To this very day, Thursday, April 22nd, 2010, these deadly unexploded ordnances continue to claim the lives of a people who are not and never were at war with us. And unless we rectify this now, the loss of life will go on and on tomorrow, the next day, and every day thereafter. As a matter of record, I am including a statement prepared by Minister Counselor and Deputy Chief of Mission Mai Siang Wong of the Lao People's Democratic Republic to the United States. I recognize the historic nature of this statement, and I pledge to do all I can to provide assistance for the unexploded ordnance clearance issue, mine awareness, and victims assistance programs, which is an investment in the future of the lives of millions of the people of Laos. Joining us today is the Honorable Scott Marcel, a dear friend, Deputy Assistant Secretary and Ambassador to the ASEAN Affairs of the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs of the State Department. Hopefully my good friend Ambassador Secretary Marcel can explain to us why the Bureau is not increasing the money that is sorely needed to clear up this unexploded ordnance. Scott Marcel has served posts in Vietnam, the Philippines, Hong Kong, Brazil, Turkey, as well as with the Economic Bureau, with the Office of Monetary Affairs. As a Deputy Assistant Secretary, he has done an excellent and remarkable job, and I sincerely hope that we will continue to work together on this issue and find good resolution, not only to the needs of the people of Laos, but for our government. Secretary Marcel is a graduate of the University of California, Davis, and also from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. He is a father of 2 daughters, and very, very happy that we have the opportunity of having him testify this afternoon. As I said earlier, I'm very, very happy to have my good friend and colleague, gentleman from California, Congressman Mike Honda, who serves on the Committee on Appropriations, and I would like at this time to give him an opportunity for an opening statement if he has one.